The main thing we need to consider is the pH of the large intestine. It's somewhere between 6 and 7, but ideally more towards 7. And normally the pH of the hindgut is preferred to be around about 6.7, so closer to the pH 7. And it's very important to maintain this because this is the pH required for these microbes to remain healthy in this environment. Bicarbonate and phosphate salts are secreted into the hindgut to make sure that this pH is maintained. And also these volatile fatty acids, as the name suggests, are acidic in nature, could potentially drop the pH. So they are absorbed fairly rapidly across the gut wall. So that happening along with the production of these bicarbonate and phosphate salts means that hopefully this pH is maintained. So in ideal circumstances that takes place. What can affect this actually is when we don't have enough fibre coming into the hindgut, and instead we have digestive that's high in starch and sugars. And this is not ideal because the microbes that are present in the large intestine are actually designed to degrade fibre. The other thing is these microbes need time to adapt to any changes in the diet. So any abrupt changes to the diet can significantly affect this hindgut environment. If you very quickly change the diet from a high fibre diet to a high concentrate diet, for example, you will see in the hindgut environment reduced fibre digestibility. There's an increased risk of horses developing colic. There's a high likelihood of the pH in the hindgut environment dropping so that the hindgut environment becomes more acidic. And these are all things that we want to avoid because we want to maintain this pH of around about 6.7 and keep this hindgut environment healthy. I've put this diagram up here to show you what can happen if we have a lot of starch and sugars coming into the hindgut. So we don't want this. Cast your mind back to the previous videos where we talked about sugars and starch being digested in the small intestine, and this is where we want this to take place. When we get a lot of starch and sugars coming into the hindgut, we get a lot of volatile fatty acids produced very quickly. So whilst we get these produced with our fibre diets, they're produced much slower, and you'll remember I talked about these VFAs being absorbed across the gut wall. What can happen when they're produced very quickly is they're not absorbed quickly enough, and this can drop the pH of the gut. And when the pH of the large intestine drops, these microbes, these bacteria, protozoa, fungi, which survive in conditions with a pH of around about 6.7, they don't survive well in conditions where the pH is lower. So if these lots of VFAs being produced lowers the pH, these microbes don't survive. And what happens instead actually is other microbes begin to proliferate, those that are more effective at breaking down simple sugars and starch. So these bacteria, which are known as lactic acid bacteria, and they begin to produce lactic acid as a byproduct. And this lactic acid is a much stronger acid than the acid from the volatile fatty acids, and this further drops the pH. And we don't want this low pH because what can happen with a lower pH is you've got a very unhealthy environment, you've got death of the fibre degrading bacteria, you've potentially got a higher risk of a horse developing colic, you've got acidosis beginning, so acidosis meaning this drop in pH, and then potentially this may lead to development of other issues such as laminitis. So the take-home message here is we want to avoid starch and sugars entering the hindgut. We want to feed meal sizes that are small enough to enable these to be digested in the small intestine environment. So in summary then, the large intestine is designed to ferment fibre. And It needs fibre to remain healthy, so the microbes in there need the fibre to remain healthy, and the horse needs the fibre to use the end products as an energy source. These microbes break down the fibre to produce volatile fatty acids and gases, and as I said, the volatile fatty acids are absorbed across the gut wall and the horse uses them as an energy source. We need fibre to maintain a healthy gut, which we all know now, but we also have to remember that we don't just need fibre for the gut, but we need fibre to satisfy the behavioural needs of the horse, because remember, the horse is motivated to chew on an almost continual basis. And then finally, thinking about the hindgut, or the gut in general actually, we want to avoid any sudden changes to the diet. So anything that will cause a disruption to the gastrointestinal environment, so an abrupt change from forage to concentrate, or even an abrupt change from concentrate to forage, or an abrupt change, for example, to grass hay and then moving the horse on to fresh pasture. That's an abrupt change to diet. We might see, as a result of this, reduced diet digestibility, or we may also see detrimental changes to the animal's health. So in order to avoid this, we want to make sure that we make any changes gradually. So to summarise the gastrointestinal tract as a whole then, let's cast our mind back to the mouth. In the mouth, it's important that we have effective mastication taking place. We know that saliva is produced, we know that saliva is important to act as a buffer for the gastric environment, but also to act as a lubricant for the passage of digested down the esophagus. Thinking about the small intestine, we know that there are 3 parts to the small intestine, and that the majority of digestion that takes place in the small intestine is of starches and sugars and fats and proteins, and there are enzymes produced in the small intestine that digest these different feed constituents. Also, the absorption of the majority of minerals takes place in the small intestine as well. And then we have our large intestine, which starts with the cecum, then we have the large colon and the small colon, and this is where microbial degradation of fibre takes place. The end products are volatile fatty acids and gases, and the volatile fatty acids are used as an energy source by the horse. We think that there's little or no protein absorption takes place in the large intestine, and that we want to make sure that we're feeding feedstuffs that are high in proteins that are able to be digested in the small intestinal environment, and that the health of the large intestine is very important, and we must make sure that our dietary management of our horses and our ponies and our donkeys are such that it promotes health of the gastrointestinal environment.